Anyway, thanks very much for joining everybody. I'm Philip Calder. I'm from the University of Southampton in the UK. So we were one of the partners in Preventomics. So far today we've heard about the some of the biomarker science, some of the genetic basis of what Preventomics has been trying to do. We heard about the importance of the microbiota. We moved on to consider the development of the software and the Preventomics system that sits behind the software. We just heard about the importance of the do's. But the key thing for me in the program was actually testing the system, testing it in human trials. And this session is about precision nutrition for an individualized dietary treatment. And it's really about the trials that were conducted as part of Preventomics during the last 3.5 years. 3 slightly different approaches, and we're going to hear about those in the course of the session. So we have 4 presentations. The first will be, so I'll go through and introduce all 4 now, and then we can just slip between them as we go. So Milanne Galekop, for researcher in digital health from Eurecat, will tell us about evaluation of the algorithm behind Preventomics. Then Josep Ma del Bas, Director of Nutrition and Health at Eurecat and the Scientific Director of the Preventomics program, will tell us about the results from the human trials. Then Tomas, R&D Manager from Carinsa, will introduce us to the importance of selecting functional ingredients as part of a personalized dietary approach. And then importantly at the end, Milanne Galekop from Erasmus School of Health Policy and Management will tell us about the costs of these personalized interventions based on some modeling. So we have 4 presentations. 3 of these will be 15 minutes. Josep's will be 30 minutes. And then if everyone sticks to time, at the end, we will have 10 minutes for Q&A. So please remember to put your Q&A in the chat. So without further ado, Ma, I'll pass over to you to get us underway. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Okay. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Mar from Digital Health of Eurecat, and I will present a summary about the evaluation of the algorithm behind Preventomics, which from now on we will refer to it as Decision Support System, or DSS. Here there is the index with the different parts that we will deal with. We will start with a summary of the DSS. Then we will talk about the algorithm itself. Then we will continue talking about the contribution of the DSS in the different pilots. And finally, we will present the testing of the DSS and the final conclusions. So now we will see an overview that illustrates the contribution of the DSS in Preventomics. Once the different user data is extracted, that we need the complete set of the metabolic biomarkers, the genetic profile and SNPs, the gender and the food servings. For each participant, it is uploaded into the DSS engine. Then the algorithm assigns each participant into one metabolic cluster. The metabolic cluster assignment process is at the core of the DSS recommendations. By outputting the altered metabolic cluster of the user, it triggers the whole rule system, activating the food item search and generating the warnings. Then these outputs, together with the different questionnaires coming from the Nutrition Recommend System, NRS, it generates the final recommendations that are integrated into the different apps of Aldi, Meteda, Simple Feast, and Omni, depending on the pilot of the user. This DSS engine has been created and adjusted from data of previous studies and scientific knowledge. So we will start talking about the DSS algorithm where the cluster assignation is done. The process starts by retrieving from the database all the metabolic biomarkers values and the genetic analysis. Then it computes a score for each of the 5 different clusters that we have: carbohydrate, lipid, inflammation, oxidative stress, and microbiota. The cluster scoring function results from metabolic cluster score adjusted by a genetic risk. The metabolic score is a combination between the biomarkers select and their corresponding weights. And the genetic risk is an estimate of the genetic influence of the biomarkers of the cluster. Finally, we define the altered cluster as the cluster obtaining the highest score. So during the pilots, each participant has been assigned a cluster based on their metabolic and genetic data. In total, we have 600 participants that were initially enrolled from the 4 different pilots that we have participants from Spain, UK, Poland, and Denmark. Of these participants, 70% are women, and regarding weight, 95 participants are normal weight, 200 are overweight, and 305 are obese. In the table below, we can see a summary of the percentage of how many participants has been assigned in each of the 5 different clusters, being carbohydrate, the cluster with more participants. Okay, so once the altered cluster is computed, the warnings and the list of recommended and disallowed foods is generated. Following, we can see the individual results. Each participant has a personal access to the Preventomics platform, where by clicking to the recommendation section, each participant can see which cluster he or she belongs to, the list of the warnings and advices regarding genetics, and the list of recommended and disallowed foods. From now, we will describe the different analyses done to validate the cluster scoring function with the data generated by the pilots. The output of the DSS was very difficult to validate because we cannot compare it with something that has been already verified, since Preventomics have created the clusters and the classification. So we don't have any external biomarker, anthropometric parameter, expert board, or a combination of those that could reliably classify the participants as altered in one of the 5 different metabolic clusters. So for this reason, we focused on unsupervised machine learning techniques that do not require any real label to compare and validate the results obtained. We have used PCA, that stands for Principal Component Analysis, to illustrate the spreading of the participants regarding different variables that are colored. The analysis of these distributions through PCA has allowed us to validate the results given by the DSS. Just a brief explanation about what is PCA. PCA is a dimensionality reduction technique that creates new variables called principal components that are a linear combination of the independent variables that we had in the original dataset, in our case, the biomarkers, while preserving the maximum variance of all the dataset. The new axis of the PCA plots represent the direction of the maximum variation through the data. The PCA that we will see in this slide and in the next slides is created from the data of the 600 participants that we had initially at visit 1. The different variables that we have used to color, these variables has not been used to create the PCA. So here we can see the PCA that has been colored by the cluster that has been assigned to each participant. So in other words, each dot represents a participant and the color of the dot represents the altered cluster of that participant. So if we select a purple dot, it means that it's a participant that has been assigned to the inflammation cluster. In this case, we cannot observe any clear separation in relation to the metabolic clusters. And because of this, we decided to analyze the score of each cluster separately, which it is the output that clearly explains us the metabolic cluster, the metabolic status of the participants in each of the 5 clusters. So in this slide, we can observe the same PCA, but this PCA is colored by the carbohydrate metabolic score. And as the score is higher, the participant is more metabolically affected in that cluster. In other words, the participants more affected to carbohydrate are found in the top left side of the plot, while the participants that are healthier are found in the bottom right side of the plot, as it is remarked with a green rectangle. We can observe a clear tendency of the score of the participants from lower to higher. In this graph, both graphs are the same. The difference is that in the right graph, we have added the influence of the different biomarkers that are used to calculate the carbohydrate score. As we can see, the carbohydrate biomarkers are directed at the same direction as the participants with a higher score, which is coherent with the algorithm. Here we can see comparable results analyzing the scores of the other metabolic clusters, where there is a clear tendency from lower to higher scores in all clusters. And in all of them, we can see also that in the bottom right side of the plot, there are located the participants that with the lowest score, which are the healthier participants. Moreover, all the biomarkers have an influence towards the direction to the participants more affected, being the results consistent with the algorithm. These metabolic scores that we have seen, they have not been included neither in the PCA nor the algorithm. So they serve as a background to analyze the general results of the DSS. However, the anthropometric variables cannot fully explain the distribution of the participants, as we can see in the following graph. In the left graph, we can find the same graph that we saw, which there are the participants colored again by the carbohydrate score. And in the right graph, there are the participants colored by the BMI. As we can observe, the left graph explains better the distribution of the participants, grouping them perfectly in the different parts of the graph regarding their metabolic score. And in contrast, in the BMI graph, the participants are more mixed, being participants with a higher BMI that are in the healthy part. This explains us that BMI is not enough to explain the metabolic status of the participants, because there can be people with a high BMI that are metabolically healthy. In contrast, the 5 metabolic clusters scores can altogether better explain how the participants are distributed, and they can provide more insights about the metabolic and the genetic status of each participant. So to conclude, from the scores of each of the 5 different clusters, we can define 4 metabolic regions where there are the participants classified by their metabolic condition. Thank you very much, and I will be glad to answer any question.
Sorry, having a few technical issues there. Yeah, I think Ma will move on to the next presentation and take all the Q&A at the end. Thank you. Excellent presentation. Josep.
So again, okay, I'm going to share my screen. And yeah, okay, just let me. Okay, so I'm going to share with you some of the results that we have found in the different nutrition intervention studies that we have conducted during this Preventomics project. I won't show all the results for all the pilots. You will see that there are differences, because otherwise we could be here for the whole day. So let's start with user journey. You have seen it in different presentations now, just to have an overview of what's going on with information and samples. I would say sample journey instead of user journey. Just for you to know, we have collected in an initial visit for each participant biological samples and also data coming from questionnaires. Biological samples, mainly blood samples and urine samples, have been shipped all along Europe. Oral smear was shipped to Alimentomica for SNPs analysis, feces to Eurecat, and the different questionnaires and information coming from questionnaires to different partners such as Erasmus or ONME. Imagine, though, how shipping all this kind of biological material in the middle of pandemics it was really difficult, and actually the global pandemics affected all the nutritional studies that we are presenting here. So this is also something common to all the different studies. We have this initial visit in which biological samples are collected and analyzed. Questionnaires provide the information that is subsequently integrated into with the DSS and the nutrition recommender system. So each participant can be allocated in one of these metabolic clusters: carbohydrate, lipids, inflammation, oxidative stress, or microbiota. Then the interventions are deployed, as we will see in a few minutes. And then we have this final visit in which also biological samples and questionnaires are collected again, so we can study changes in food intake, metabolic and food consumption markers, anthropometrics, good microbiota, quality of life, or physical activity. So the 4 different nutritional intervention studies I'm going to show you are representative of 3 different business models. In the case of the study conducted by the University of Copenhagen, it corresponds to the food delivery business model. Southampton and Jagiellonian University conducted these studies to test the system Preventomics integrated in tool for professionals. And finally, the shopping experience, which was conducted in Reus, Spain by Eurecat, together with Aldi and ONME, participating in all these studies. So in the first case, the University of Copenhagen, personalized nutrition in food delivery, the technical objective was to assess the performance of the Preventomics system applied to personalized menus for delivery. And the scientific objective was to test the effectiveness of personalized nutritional plan based on functional plant-based menus, reducing body fat mass and inducing favorable changes in metabolic profile compared to general plant-based menus and dietary recommendations. So the target population was obese population. Volunteers received personalized menus consisting on breakfast and dinners 6 days a week, and healthy personalized recipes through the application of Simple Feast. In principle, no dietitians were involved when providing recommendations during the intervention. They were only there for follow-up, technical issues, and questions and answers. So basically, what we have is the personalized nutritional recommendations, which are retrieved by Simple Feast to elaborate and deliver the different personalized menus. These personalized menus are enriched with functional ingredients provided by company Carinsa, and these menus are delivered at home to volunteers, which receive all this food together with the behavioral change provided by ONME. The design of this intervention, volunteers were divided in 2 different groups. The first one is a control group in which they receive Simple Feast standard meals and messages coming from ONME, but which were considered as neutral, not to change the behavior. And a second group, which was the personalized plan group, which received simple feast meals based on personalization nutrition. They had as well the application with healthy recipes and a personalized behavioral change. The primary outcome was change in body fat mass as measured by DEXA, and diets were plant-based isocaloric diets for both groups, control and personalized plan. So regarding results, we allocated 100 participants, 82 of them were completers, so we had a dropout of 18%. The population was mainly females. There was and this is something that you are going to see that is general in all the studies, a predominance of women. And finally, well, the baseline was pretty well balanced between the two groups. So at the end of the intervention, the primary endpoint, the fat mass change from baseline to week 10 in the personalized and control groups, as you can see, we couldn't find any difference between the personalized plan and the control subjects. Whilst when analyzing all other parameters that were analyzed in the study, I show you here an extract of those, but they are quite representative because we couldn't find any kind of difference between both groups. So as conclusions, the technical objectives were accomplished. We have seen that it's feasible to elaborate and deliver functionalized menus in a personalized manner. We have seen that both groups lost an average of 3% body weight, which is good news, with improvements in lipid profile and insulin sensitivity. 53% out of 17 went from pre-diabetes at baseline to normal glycemic, 39% out of 39 ameliorated the HOMA-IR, 48% out of 21, which were borderline for cholesterol, could normalize the levels of cholesterol. So, and scientifically, the lack of a statistical significance between both groups could be attributed to the fact that both groups were receiving very healthy meals with similar macronutrient composition. So actually, we had obese population shifted into a vegetarian diet. So it was a very, it was quite difficult to find any differences. So also the relatively short duration might have impeded to see some changes in inflammatory biomarkers because something could be seen mainly in interleukin 10, but perhaps we had relatively short duration. So if we move into the following business model, which is professional personalized nutritional advice to aid weight loss, it was conducted in by two different partners, Jagiellonski University in Cracovia, Poland, and University of Southampton in the United Kingdom. The business model, Preventomics for professionals. The technical objective was to assess the performance of the Preventomics system integrated in a tool for professional dietitians. And the scientific objective was to test the effectiveness of the Preventomics system to reduce body weight and waist circumference and induce favorable changes in metabolic profile compared to dietitian-led general dietary recommendations. The target, again, was obese population. This was an intervention intended for weight loss. And dietitians use the Meteda software empowered by the Preventomics system for designing dietary plans and deliver personalized nutritional recommendations to consumers, to their patients. And they could have a continuous follow-up. Dietitians could have a continuous follow-up and a continuous conversation with the users granted by the metadata application you have seen some minutes ago. So again, we have these personalized nutritional recommendations, which are going to Meteda, are going to ONME as well for designing the behavioral change, And all these recommendations and behavioral change program is provided to the dietitian via the Meteda application. So the dietitian can interact with the volunteer with the MetaDiet application to deliver the personalized messages. So the design in these studies was based on 3 arms. The first one is a control group with general dietary recommendations. We have diet, follow-up, and consultations with dietitian, but there is no personalization at all. We have a second group, which we call personalized nutrition, which is the recommendations based only on omics and genetics and metabolomics and different technologies we have used. And a third group, which we call personalized plan, which basically was the personalized nutrition, including the behavioral change. Because in this way, we could see whether there are differences or not by including this behavioral change tool. The primary outcome was change in waist circumference, and diets were based on calorie restriction and specific diet plans for volunteers allocated in carbohydrate, lipids, inflammation, microbiota, and oxidative stress, except of course for the control group, which had these general dietary recommendations. So we are going to see the results separately and then derive some conclusions regarding the differences that we are going to see. So in Poland, this is the flowchart. They started with 265 subjects enrolled and registered on the DSS, but completed the intervention 170. So we had, a dropout of 35%. Regarding characteristics of the population, in the baseline, we have a pretty well balance between obesity type 1, type 2, and overweight. But again, you can see this predominance of females, the 72%, which has been usual in our studies. As on a baseline, we start with very well balanced groups. So results, once more, we couldn't observe any kind of difference between the 3 groups in the primary endpoint, which was waist circumference, despite we observed this time effect because all groups ameliorated this parameter. But when analyzing different outcomes, either anthropometrics or biochemistry parameters, we couldn't see neither any kind of difference. What is more, it looked like the control group presented slightly better outcome than the personalized nutrition group, while the personalized plan group was the one which could be considered as with the best outcome. But anyway, we couldn't find significant differences to extract conclusions from this study. But if we go into the Southampton study, then we can see a very different picture. I have to say, though, before explaining this, that Southampton University was the one mostly affected by the COVID, mainly because they closed their research facilities to all non-COVID studies. So this was until June 2021, and we had no notification that the study could start until July of 2021. So imagine the study had to start really, really late, and we were not in time. And it's a pity because you will see some very nice results. So we started by randomizing 60 individuals, and the visit 2, we have 59, and as finishers, as completers, we have 54 participants. So there is a very, very low number of dropouts in here. Regarding population characteristic, we also have a pretty well-balanced population if we consider obesity class 1, class 2, and overweight, and also a predominance of females. So these characteristics of population are almost identical to those from Poland. Regarding baseline, again, we have a very well-balanced starting point. So what did we see after the 4 months of intervention? First of all, the primary endpoint in waist circumference, despite having this low number of participants, we could detect statistically significant differences for the personalized plan group, with a decrease of waist circumference, group per time interaction in this model, and as you can see, significant differences between the initial and final visit. For the personalized nutrition group, we couldn't see the same interaction between factors, but as you see, there is also differences between the first and the second visit. So very, very nice close results when compared to general recommendations. And when we go to anthropometrics and body composition parameters, we find a very similar outcome. It is an effect of both personalized nutrition interventions, but statistically significant for weight reduction in the personalized plan group. We have the same situation for body mass index, fat mass, and body fat percentage. So pretty good results, pointing out the effectiveness of this personalized plan and, in a lesser extent, personalized nutrition. So regarding other parameters such as clinical biomarkers, we could identify statistically significant changes between in visit 2 in the levels of insulin, which were lower in personalized nutrition versus control and personalized plan versus control, glucose, which was lower in personalized nutrition and personalized plan versus control. Also HOMA-IR, we're talking about the 60% lower values in personalized nutrition versus control and 48% in personalized plan versus control, and also some results in markers of inflammation, such as 36% lower values in the personalized nutrition versus control, and some slight surprise, like in CD14, in which we could see a slight increase in the levels in personalized nutrition group. And another interesting point that was pointed by our partners in Southampton is the change that could be observed in the food group intake. So regardless, there is no significant group and per time interaction with the model. We can see statistical significant changes coming out from here, and these are done mainly by personalized nutrition and personalized plan groups, which show a decrease on the dietary inflammatory score, which is really interesting. And similar situations in the case of the intake of sources of added sugar or refined and high glycemic index carbohydrates, decreases in personalized nutrition and personalized plan groups, whilst an increase in the intake of fruits and vegetables can be seen in the personalized nutrition group. So overall, very nice results in this nutrition intervention, but very different to those that we found in the Polish study. So the discussion and conclusions, we can find some reasons for these discrepancies. The first conclusion would be that the integration of personalized nutrition by means of Preventomics in the metadata platform for professional dietitians was successful. In general, getting data from both studies, personalized plan group presented better outcomes than personalized nutrition groups, suggesting that behavioral change plan increased the effectiveness of personalized nutrition. And the key point, I think, here, when we compare both studies, is that they were driven by professional dietitians, but there were no standardization on how to communicate preventomic results with volunteers. So this was something that was left to them. The main difference, therefore, can be found in the way dietitians interpreted the information provided by the system and how this was communicated to volunteers. So this is very important, because from these differences, we have extracted a specific conclusion and the way to improve and optimize the performance of the Preventomics system. Now we know how to improve it. So altogether, the analysis of differences between both interventions allows to refine and optimize the Preventomics system by establishing more accurate guidelines on how to use and communicate the information provided by the system. You have seen during all these presentations that how to communicate information, scientific basis are really, really important for consumers and for the engagement of them into this kind of projects. So finally, the last one is personalized nutrition in an e-commerce environment. The technical objective was to assess the Preventomics system applied to a retailer e-commerce platform. The scientific objective to assess the effects on the adherence to the Mediterranean diet of a fully digitally driven personalized intervention using recommendations provided by the Preventomics system compared to the same digitally driven intervention using standard dietary recommendations. The target was general population, we will see it now, and in this case volunteers have the capacity to elaborate their shopping list guided by the Preventomics system in an Aldi microsite. It simulates a platform for e-commerce. This means that there are no dietitians involved when providing recommendations during the intervention. They are there only for follow-up and technical issues, despite they had to answer some questions regarding, science behind the recommendations that we will provide. So we have this nutritional recommender system, and the microsite from Aldi retrieves the information about each participant, matches this information with the Aldi catalog. So then we have a specific catalog for each participant. It doesn't mean that each participant has restricted access to different foods, but they will see which foods are recommended for them, which foods are not recommended, and which foods are neutral. So with this information, the consumer can elaborate their shopping list and also receive the ONME behavioral change program. In this case, we had a similar design to that shown for the professional tools. We have a control group with general dietary recommendations. In this case, they are using the digital platform. It means that the digital tool used in this study is the same for all three groups. We have a personalized nutrition group which receives recommendations based on omics and genetics and so on. And a third group, the personalized plan, which is basically the personalized nutrition with an added layer of behavioral change by only 4 months. And as I said, dietary choices at Aldi using Preventomics retailer website. So the primary outcome was adherence to Mediterranean diet, as calculated by Midas. And according diets, there were no restriction, only the Mediterranean diet used as the basis, which is the healthy diet that we have used as reference in this project. So just a few snapshots of how this Aldi microsite works. We have an initial dashboard and different kind of recommendations. The control group receives general recommendations, and the personalized nutrition and personalized plan group have an enrichment of these general recommendations with all those recommendations depending on their allocation into the different metabolic clusters. All users can navigate through the catalog, only that the personalized nutrition and personalized plan groups have specific recommendations based on their metabolic state, while control groups have recommendations, general recommendations again. And finally, a look to how the shopping list looks like. It's like any e-commerce tool, but the difference is that for personalized nutrition and personalized plan group, they could see which products they have chosen were recommended for them, which were not recommended, and also we cannot see this here, but they also have information about neutral products. So they are not recommended or neither recommended products. So the main results, we started or allocated 168 volunteers, and could, as concluders, we have 134. So we had a big dropout as well, 32%. But if we look into the different groups, we can see that in the control group, the dropout was 30%, while in the personalized nutrition we have a 19%, and in personalized plan a 14%, which is almost significant if we compare both personalized plan and control groups by a Fisher exit test. So it seems that the behavioral change program seems to increase the adherence to this study. When okay, and then we have the population characteristics, predominance of females as well, and distribution of normal weight, overweight, and obese that matches quite well the situation in the Spanish population. So regarding results, about anthropometrics, well, first of all, MIDAS, we could see no difference between the three groups, and that was because all of them increased their score in Mediterranean diet adherence, either control group, but also personalized nutrition and personalized plan group. So these are good news because this kind of digital interventions might serve to increase the adherence to Mediterranean diet. But then, when we compare different anthropometric variables, such as weight or BMI, we can see significant differences between groups, and these are due to mainly the personalized nutrition and the personalized plan group. Also, when comparing other anthropometric variables, we couldn't see any statistical difference between groups, though for percentage of body fat, we could see some slightly better outcome for the control group. And regarding biomarkers or metabolic state, I'm showing here the results of the scores that were calculated for the different diet plans designed for lipid, oxidative stress, microbiota, carbohydrate, and inflammation. We can see different outcomes, but perhaps we can focus in this one, which is close to statistical significance, which is the cluster for microbiota, in which we can see effects of the personalized nutrition group and the personalized plan group. And in fact, analysis of beta diversity in microbiota has showed that there is a statistical difference in the personalized plan group when compared with control. So if we go deeper into this analysis and we do this exercise, taking the control group, which has been recommended with a standard diet, and we merge personalized and personalized plan group in order to gain a statistical power. We divide them into the different diet plans. We can see, and then we calculate the difference in the different scores, the different metabolic scores. We can see very nice results, such as the carbohydrate score is reduced when volunteers are subjected to a diet plan to decrease or to ameliorate carbohydrate metabolism when compared with standard recommendations. We see something similar for microbiota score. Those participants in the microbiota dietary plan have reduced scoring for this risk factor, and also those under the carbohydrate dietary plan show an amelioration of microbiota biomarkers. And the same for oxidative stress. We can see that the only one able to decrease significantly the oxidative stress score is the treatment or the allocation of the dietary plan for oxidative stress when compared with the control group. So very nice things and information and data that we have to keep analyzing. So basically, the integration of personalized nutrition by means of Preventomics in an e-commerce model was successful. There is a digitally driven personalized nutritional intervention in general population improved MIDAS in all intervention groups, suggesting that ICTs are a reliable tool for delivering dietary recommendations. We have seen as well that digitally driven personalized nutrition interventions in general population presented slightly better outcomes than digitally driven standard recommendations if we consider together anthropometrics and metabolic biomarkers. But these results suggest that personalized nutrition is a reliable tool to induce health benefits in general population. But obviously, we will need in-depth data analysis to underscore the real differences between these health effects and the different diet plans that we have seen in here in all the different diets. So as general conclusions, just to say that integration of personalized nutrition by means of Preventomics in the 3 business models was successful, but improvements are warranted. The results that we have obtained suggest that the Preventomic approach might be a reliable strategy for providing personalized nutritional recommendations to improve health status through professional tools for dietitians and e-commerce platforms. A very key point, very important point, is how Preventomic recommendations are communicated to the user. So this is something to be optimized. Now we know how to do that. And finally, we have gathered so much data that we will have work for the following years, basically. So further data analysis might underscore associations between dietary plans, metabolism, microbiota, and food consumption by markers, which are all analyzed in here. So more in-depth data analysis will allow to optimize this Preventomics approach for personalized nutrition. And that's all. I know I've been a little bit more than one expected. Sorry for that.
No, I think timing is fine, Josep. Thanks so much. And there are some questions coming in for you, Josep, so we'll hold them off for the end. And I'll hand over now to Markov, who's going to tell us about the importance of functional ingredients as a personalized nutrition strategy. Markov.
Yes, hi, thanks, Philip. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna show, okay, fine. So I'm assuming you can see now my full screen.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Well, hello everyone. So I am going to present you our part, Carinsa's part in the Preventomics project. In particular, what I'm going to talk about is about functional ingredients and how they can help us to achieve our optimal diet and they can become our best choice. So, well, I'm going to summarize a little of what I'm going to talk about. To begin with, I'm going to explain very briefly what we do in Carinsa, our company. Then I'm going to start by talking about how we can meet or how we can know customers' demands in more detail. Then we will go on with defining what functional ingredients are and continuing with the selection of functional ingredients that we in Carinsa have done for the Preventomics project. Then we will end with some brief conclusions. So Grupo Carinsa, the Carinsa Group, was founded in 1993 by our founder Alberto Martinez. Our company is located in Sant Quirze del Vallès, which is in the Barcelona area. And we have 3 facilities in the area, which are Paimsa, Carinsa, and Carincap. It's like 3 companies. So Grupo Carinsa is focused on developing and manufacturing flavors, fragrances, food additives, and food preparations, both in human and animal food sectors, but we also work in the field of fragrances. So the company designs and applies fragrances for detergents, cosmetics, air fresheners, and sprays, something alike. Here we can see in more detail a selection of all of the areas in which our R&D department is working as of now. So first of all is functional nutrition, in which we can put the Preventomics project as well. We have worked also with encapsulation. Based on that, we have made a spin-off company, which is Carincap. It's focused only on microencapsulations. Then we also work in alternative protein sources, plant-based products and all of that. Neuroscience studies as well, a bit of nutrigenomics, and our last one, and the one that we are more proud of at the moment, is 3D food printing. We are starting now, already working on a project to be our foundational stone for our further work in this area. So now starting with the actual theme of the presentation, when talking about Preventomics project, the center always has to be located in the consumer. And in order to fulfill our consumers' demands, there are a series of main factors that we need to consider. As those factors, we consider that play a key role in defining what they are essentially asking for. So that some of those factors can be seen here, maybe their lifestyle, their age, their sex, their personality, but also some social ones like their education levels, their beliefs, their religions, and other sensory preferences. Here in a bit more detail, we can separate the factors that determine consumers' demand based on one of those two kinds. There are those related to the overall health of the individual. In there, we can identify their mood, their general well-being, the quality of life that they consider they have, their overall happiness, and the activity that they show on a daily basis. And on the other hand, more specifically speaking, we have the ones that are related to particular diseases prevention. Some of these diseases can be the cardiovasculars, hypertension, diabetes, arthritis, or cholesterol. So now what's next after taking people's concerns into account and knowing what they want? We get to the point of introducing the concept of functional ingredients, the whats and whys. So as I'm sure that we are all aware of in this session today, current times are very, very different to how life was a few years ago. Improper nutrition is way more usual now. As you can see, fast food is more normal to see than it was 50, 60 years ago, as well as insufficient physical activity, as our lifestyle has now changed. To state an obvious example, I'm sure all of you have been working on remote at some point during the pandemic. Well, this has obviously resulted in changes to our lifestyle, to our bodies, and to our general well-being, because we are now moving less on a daily basis than what we used to. So considering all of this, the result has been an epidemic of non-infectious diseases, as the ones that I mentioned, cardiovascular ones, cholesterol, some of those. We can think about how can we shift the paradigm? How is the way of shifting this? It can be through the use of functional foods, which is what I am going to explain right now. So a functional food, to define it and state it clearly, is basically a food product that can provide health-related benefits, such as reducing the risk of diet-related diseases, maybe boosting our immune system, or even reducing the risk of cardiovascular problems, as I was saying earlier. See, these are some examples of functional ingredients that you can see: the avocados, goji berries, and chia seeds. And how do we get a functional food? There are a series of ways to get them. Some of them don't even require any changes, as some ingredients can be already considered functional foods by themselves. But there are some cases in which some others can be considered after the addition or the particular concentration of a beneficial ingredient that they have, or the complete opposite, on the other way, is after removing or substituting one of the harmful ingredients or components that they have. So here I like to highlight this quote that I think sums up really well to close the definition of functional food. It says, if it can be proven that a food product affects one or more functions on our body in a positive way, this is very important, it has to be in a positive way, this product can be regarded as a functional food. So we have to keep in mind that even though most functional foods are products that we already have included in our diets, we should make an effort in including some of those that are maybe not as known for us in Europe as they are known in other parts of the world. So I'm now entering the final and most important part, I think, is which functional ingredients we chose and we sent to Simple Feast in Denmark as a way to introduce them in the Preventomics project on our behalf. So the first one of them is inulin. Inulin is a natural soluble dietary fiber, which is commonly extracted from chicory roots on a commercial level, but it can be found in many other vegetables. It has been used for providing a sweet taste, acting as a sweetener, also as a texturizer, or even as an stabilizer in some emulsion formations. So this ingredient basically helps us in lowering the lipid and glucose levels in our blood. It helps modulating intestinal flora because it has a capacity as being a natural prebiotic fiber. And it has been reported recently that it can also enhance the absorption of calcium and some other minerals. The next one are fructooligosaccharides, or FOS. These are soluble fibers as well. They are made of glucose and fructose, and you can extract them from a wide range of fruits and vegetables, but the ones that we have focused on, the main ones, are artichoke and asparagus, as you can see on the images. Even though our body cannot digest these fibers, they are very useful for us because they work as energetic substrates for the bifidobacteria that are present in our guts. So based on this, their main function is to stimulate our immune system, our immunological activity, as well as others like battling digestive diseases and inhibiting harmful bacteria, as I said, bifidobacteria, and well, not in this case bifidobacteria, but other harmful bacteria. We can prevent them from growing in our guts based on the addition of this component. And all of these characteristics, as I said, make them a great ingredient, especially to supplement baby food, infant food, which normally lack this kind of products in their diets. And finally, the third and last ingredient that we consider should we talk about today is the turmeric powder. This powder, it has become very popular in Europe recently due to its fantastic properties that I'm going to talk about now in more detail. But we have to keep in mind that this product has been hugely popular already for a long time in countries like India and Pakistan, where they have incorporated in their diets, in, for example, their curries. I'm sure you have all tried Indian food, chicken tikka masala, something like that. Well, it's based entirely in the turmeric and other spices, but mainly turmeric powder. So this spice has been named by some experts as the most effective nutritional supplement in all of human existence. And you might think, well, this is quite a statement to do. I can list some of the benefits that it has shown just to help you in making this into your mind. It has shown anti-inflammatory properties. It promotes the antioxidant capacities that we have in our body on a natural way. It lowers the risk of heart-related diseases. And it also has some potential in preventing cancer, Alzheimer's. It has also shown effects against depression and many more. We could keep talking about this, but I don't have as much time. So as you can see, the potential of this powder, this spice, is huge, and we thought that it was a great idea to include it in the Preventomics project ingredients. So now to conclude and sum up, we can affirm that there is a trend going on about improving our health. It has been for a long time, but now I think it's more popular than ever. And that's why, in particular, functional foods should be, and I'm sure have become recently more and more popular and are playing an increasingly important role in our lives. So based on these functional ingredients, such as inulin, phos, turmeric powder, as I said, make for some of the best options that are available right now. Very healthy ingredients that we should definitely consider to include in our diets, and we are trying to do it through the Preventomics project, as they obviously present great benefits and a great way to battle certain diseases. As I said, cardiovascular problems, osteoporosis, obesity, cancer, you can fight all of that with just making those little adjustments in our diets. So based on this is the qualities that have made them great additions to our Preventomics ingredient list. And this was all on my behalf. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions later.
Great, Marco, thank you so much. So we'll move on to Milanne, who's going to tell us about her, I guess it's a sort of a cost, risk and benefit analysis of the outcomes we've seen so far in the human study. So Milanne, I'll hand over to you now.
Yes, okay, thank you. Welcome to the presentation about the potential costs and effects of personalized nutrition interventions. I will start with showing you what we're going to talk about during this presentation. And thereby, I will first give you an overview of how we came to different results. And these results will be discussed afterwards and will involve clinical effectiveness, the cost and economic evaluation, and patient and social aspects. And next slide, please. We will start off by giving you an overview. Thereby, we will start with this image showing you in this slide. On the right-hand side, you can click next. We see the cost component, and on the left-hand side, we see the effectiveness component. And combining these two together results in a cost-effectiveness analysis. And this leads to 3 main messages that will be shown on this slide. Starting off with the short-term cost-effectiveness. And this main message is saying that personalized nutrition intervention increases short-term cost, but could also improve clinical outcomes. The second main message is that related to the long-term cost effectiveness, that personalized nutrition can reduce long-term healthcare costs by reducing obesity-related diseases, and it can also improve quality of life and life expectancy, but a longer life will eventually lead to extra cost. And our third main message is about the preferences of people, saying that the total expenditure on nutrition is the most important factor compared to other factors related to personalized nutrition. And after this presentation, we want you to understand the results of these 3 main messages. So now we continue to our next slide, and this is saying how we came to the results of our 3 main messages. By this, we started with a literature review and data of the different pilots. And this resulted, you can click next, in a published systematic review about the cost effectiveness about personalized nutrition interventions. And this one is published in the journal Value in Health. This leads, and you can click next, to data about the quality of life and anthropometric data, and also other data and cost data. And combining these 2 together results in a cost effectiveness analysis. And in turn, this could lead to a health technology assessment by adding information from other sources and data of questionnaires. And you can click next for this. And if you click next again, we will now focus on the health technology assessment. So in the end of the process, to start off. And in the next slide, you can see that for this health technology assessment, we use the HTA core model, or the health technology assessment core model, which consists of 9 different domains. And we will not discuss all these domains during this presentation, but we will focus on clinical effectiveness. And for that, you can click next, about the cost and economic evaluation, and about the patient and social aspects. And to start off, we will talk about the clinical effectiveness. We divided the results of the clinical effectiveness in short-term results, also known as the trial results, and in long-term results. And we will focus hereby on the left-hand side of the scale. And to start off with the trial results. We will show you here a table of different results from the pilot, which were already partly explained by Josep in the earlier presentation. But for this presentation, we only focus on the first 2 results. And for that, you can click next. Focusing on the BMI, also known as the body mass index, and the quality of life as expressed in the EQ5D utilities. In Denmark, we saw that the body mass index slightly decreases when the personalized plan group was compared with the control group. If we look at the quality of life expressed in the EQ5D utilities, we see a slightly increase. However, these results are not significant. If we look at the Spanish pilot, we see that there was also a slight decrease in the body mass index, and this was significant. However, no statistically significant results were seen in the quality of life. And in Poland, we saw opposite results, as the body mass index increases when personalized plan was compared with the control, and when personalized nutrition was compared to the control group. And we saw that the quality of life decreases. However, these results were also not statistically significant. Then moving on to the long-term results. And for this, we used a cost effectiveness model to model it over a longer time period. And this longer time period was a lifetime horizon. And we still focus on the left-hand side of the scale, so about the effects. And for that, we use as an outcome measure the quality adjusted life years, also known as the healthy life years. And for that, I would like to explain shortly what this measure is about. And therefore, I have this graph in this slide. The quality adjusted life years are actually thus the healthy life years, which is calculated by using the EQ5D scores, also known as the health related quality of life, which can be between perfect health 1 or death 0. And for that, we also need the life expectancy, which you can here see on the x-axis. And in this graph, we see that someone who uses an intervention, the B group, lives longer in a better health than people without intervention, so group A. And therefore, the quality adjusted life years will be higher compared to the group without intervention. And if we apply this to our own results from the pilots, we thus used a cost effectiveness model to get these healthy life years over a lifetime horizon per participant. And we see in this table that the different quality adjusted life years are shown per intervention group. So the PP group, the PN group, and the control group. And also the differences between the PP group and the control group, and the differences between the PN and the control group are given. And from this table, we see that, as expected, the personalized plan group has higher quality adjusted life year or healthy life years compared to the control group. And this was also the case in Spain, although the differences are very small. And in Poland, the opposite was true, since the control group was showing higher quality adjusted life years compared to the intervention groups. And you can click next. And now we move on to the cost and economic evaluation part. And for that, we also have short-term results and long-term results. And we first focus on our short-term cost results. And for that, we switch to the right-hand side of the scale. The trial results consist of the intervention costs, also known as the short-term costs. And these costs were calculated over the trial period. We found, we show you here in the table that there are costs in the personalized plan group, in the personalized nutrition group, and in the control group. And we also show you the differences between these groups. And we can see from this table that in all groups, the intervention group showed higher costs compared to the control group. And you can click next. And this leads to our first main message about the short-term cost effectiveness, saying that personalized nutrition interventions increase short-term costs, but could also improve clinical outcomes. And then we move next to our long-term results and first focus on the cost results. And there we see here again the intervention costs, which were also known as the short-term cost. And these costs will be added to the longer term cost. And for that, you can click next. Since these short-term costs will be added to the long-term cost to get, in the end, the total cost. The long-term costs are costs, for example, related to the treatment of different diet-related diseases such as diabetes and stroke, but could also be costs related to productivity loss or informal care costs or unrelated medical costs. And it is expected that when an intervention has more effect compared to the control group, that the cost for disease treatments, so such as costs for diabetes or stroke, go down. And some other costs, like the unrelated medical costs, can go up since people live longer and incur more costs in that kind of aspects. And this leads to, by adding these two different costs, so the short-term cost and longer-term cost, this leads to the total cost. And for that, we focus on the incremental costs. For that, you can click next. Since it appears that if we add both costs together, that the intervention costs the intervention group has higher costs compared to the control group in all different pilots. And then the question, when will an intervention be cost effective? Well, for that, we show you first a graph in which we show you how this is calculated. For that, we need the differences in cost, and we need the difference in effect of the intervention group compared to the control group. And when the outcome of the difference in cost divided by the differences in effect is lower than a given R, or also known as a willingness to pay threshold, a new intervention or a new treatment is acceptable. When it is higher than a given R, a new treatment is unacceptable and thus not cost effective. And if we apply this to our own study results from the Preventomics pilots, we see that in the base case scenario, so when applying a BMI decrease that appeared from the pilots, we see that no intervention is cost effective when applying different willingness to pay thresholds adjusted to each country. But if we go next to the next slide, we see that when we use the highest effect observed from the 95% confidence interval in BMI, then we see that if we use that in our cost effectiveness model, that the pilot in Denmark appears to be cost effective, and the pilot in Poland in the personalized plan group as well. If we go to the next slide, we then see that our next main message about the long-term cost effectiveness was saying that personalized nutrition can reduce long-term healthcare costs by reducing obesity-related diseases. And it could also improve quality of life and life expectancy. However, longer life will eventually lead to extra cost, as I just explained. Then we move on to our last domain we are going to discuss here, and that's about the patient and social aspects. And for this, we did a questionnaire-based study, also called a discrete choice experiment. And we show you here in this slide our first results, resulted from a soft launch we did in the UK and in the Netherlands. To get these results, we asked respondents to choose between two different personalized nutrition recommendation interventions. And these interventions differ in different factors related to personalized nutrition. And these different factors are shown here on the x-axis. And from this graph, we see that relative to other factors, the total expenditure on nutrition was in both countries seen as the most important factor based on the results of the soft launch. And if we move to the next slide, we see slightly the same results in another discrete choice experiment. And here in this experiment, we ask respondents to choose between two different personalized meals interventions. And these meals interventions also differ slightly between slightly in different factors, and these factors are also shown here on the x-axis. The only difference in this questionnaire compared to the previous questionnaire is that the first factor is not the type of recommendation now, but it is the provided meals. And in this questionnaire, we again see that relative to the other factors, the total expenditure on nutrition was in both countries the most important factor based on the results of the soft launch. And that leads to our last main message that about the preferences of people, that the total expenditure on nutrition is the most important factor compared to other factors related to personalized nutrition. And that was it for now. Thank you for your attention, and let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, Milanne, thanks so much. So I'll ask the other three speakers to join us. But while they're joining, Milanne, one of the interesting things is in most European countries, we now, this is your taking into consideration your last point about people's concern about expenditure on food. In most European countries, if not all, actually the proportion of household income that's used on food is less than it has ever been before, or at least it was until about a month ago. Of course, it's going up now. So we're actually spending much less on food now than people ever had during the 20th century, yet people are still worried about the cost of food. I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, great. I think we've got about maybe 5 minutes for questions if we're lucky. Josep, some questions have come in for you, and I think people are intrigued by the differences between the Polish and UK studies, despite their similar design. I think, first of all, congratulations to all four of the groups who did those brilliant studies. So there's one question about, which has come in from Johan de Vogel, about the clusters in Poland and UK and whether differences in the clusters might be able to explain a different outcome.
Yeah, well, if we look for the different clusters for the allocation of volunteers in the two studies, we find that in the UK study, most of them, well, there is a prevalence of volunteers allocated into the inflammation cluster. You know this well. And while in the Poland study, we have a prevalence of both, similar prevalence of both inflammation and carbohydrate. But if we take, since the Polish study had a high number of participants, if we extract or stratify for those under inflammation, we cannot reproduce the results obtained in UK. So probably this is not the cause. I mean, obviously, results might depend on the diet plan, which in turn depends on the cluster. So we are having like studies inside us of a study, but in this case, we couldn't find an explanation in this sense for the differences that we have seen in both studies. So we have identified, or the most important thing we have identified, is how dietitian interprets the results coming from Preventomics and how delivers the recommendations and mainly the information about why the user is receiving this or that recommendations. So
yeah, I think that was the second question, but you've actually started to answer it now, which is the way the dietitian was working seems to be quite important. I think you make another important point, Josep, which is these are not single interventions. So within each group, they're actually, each person is having a slightly different intervention. So we're actually testing, you know, dozens of interventions within a treatment group. So I think that's an interesting approach. I'll let you rest now, Josep, and I'll go to Marcos. So Marcos, you mentioned inulin, phos, and turmeric as your functional ingredients of choice. I mean, do you think there's scope to enlarge beyond 3 to really optimize personalized nutrition? And if you were going to add 3 more, what would you add?
Well, definitely there are many more. In fact, we already added one more, but based on the time that we had to speak today, I didn't mention it, which was the sunflower oil. Particularly in Spain, you know, we are very keen on the olive oil, and we use that much more than this one, than the sunflower one. But it's true that it also has some benefits that are not as talked about as the ones in olive oil, and that's why we decided we could consider it for the project. That would be one. Maybe not now, because with the current situation with Russia and all that, you know, that sunflower oil is maybe not the best thing to buy now. But yeah, I would also add probably avocado, which I think is a product that's already become very popular in Europe as well. Something similar to what I mentioned about the turmeric. In India, it has been very popular there for a long time. In this case, avocado has already been used in Latin America for a very long time. It's quite common in their diet. And we have started, I would say, maybe last 10 to 5 years, we have started to introduce it. Now you go everywhere and to have some brunch, and there's always the avocado toast, you know, and all that is quite delicious. I like it quite a lot. But yeah, so that would be another one. And any kind of seeds that are maybe not as used now. I mentioned chia seeds on the presentation. That could be an example. You can add that on top of yogurt, and it's quite a good supplement. Or I don't know. Yeah, some kind of products like that.
Yeah, so I think there's lots of options, and of course, you know, you're talking about foods, so you know, polyphenols are really important. So berries, for example, could be a really good functional ingredient to add in here. And of course, my favorite is omega-3s, so we shouldn't forget those. So Milanne, I'll come to you, I think, for the last question of the session, which is these studies were. So you've based your analysis on the findings of the studies, and these studies were quite short considering a person's lifetime, and it's unlikely that the maximum effect had yet been achieved. In other words, there could have been bigger weight loss, and following from that, there might have been metabolic changes. So the actual benefit of these interventions over a longer period could be much greater than you've used in your calculations. And therefore the situation may be better than the way you put it. I mean, do you have any comments on that?
I totally agree with you, and I think we partly capture that by doing some scenario analysis, by including the highest possible effect observed in the pilots from the 95% confidence interval. But of course, it would be better to have longer trial periods. Yep. So yeah, but more sensitivity analysis would be possible to conduct, and to be sure to capture more of these uncertainties in our analysis.
Yeah. So and some questions have come through, and I've been told, you know, like they do on TV, I'm getting it through my earpiece here, that we can go a little bit longer. So I'll just throw a couple of these in. So I think one of the interesting things about our approach is the control group in all of these studies was actually getting an intervention also. And usually in a control group, you have no intervention. So a question has come in about, again, for you, Milanne, is whether you should really be comparing the personalized nutrition to no intervention, because you're actually comparing it to an active intervention, which has had an effect in some of the studies?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think by comparing it with a control group that also introduces the intervention, but without the personalized nutrition approach, we can really see what the effect of the personalized approach is, instead of focusing on comparing it with no intervention. Then we have the effect of the intervention plus the effect of a personalized approach. And by comparing it with an intervention in a control group that also has kind of the same intervention but without a personalized approach, we only see what the effect of the personalized approach is.
Yeah, that's always been quite a discussion within the Preventomics team for 3.5 years now. This the philosophy of what really is the control group that we're looking at. So we've got a question from Tilly Potter, and I mean, maybe I'll come to you, Josep, for this, which is the studies basically had about 2/3 women participants, 1/3 men. And Tilly wants to know how we can encourage more men to take part in these sorts of studies.
I'd like to know this as well. In this case, we would have a more balanced situation. I don't know sincerely how can we do that. I'm sure that with time and the inclusion of different kind of results and diffusion of the different results and the benefits that these kind of approaches can have on health, the interest will grow. Despite we have a lot of interest here, at least a lot of people calling for participating. But yes, it seems that women are more interested in health than men are. And well, I don't have an answer for this question.
Yeah, I mean, it may be that women are more interested in nutrition. They're more interested in their health than men. I think that, you know, there's probably some social and cultural aspects to this. We often in our studies find it difficult to recruit men. So it is an issue that Tilly has highlighted. So again, I think, Josep, this is probably one for you, which is how will the tools, this comes from Catherine Fredericks, how will the tools that were tested in the project be used in the future?
Well, we have different developments. We have different tools that have been optimized. Some others have been built from scratch. So it's a good question. From one side, we have some tools that are very, very useful for other or coming research projects, because you know that this personalized nutrition subject is something under exploration yet, and it's difficult to deploy it into society. But in other cases, in which we see a potential of the tools to be exploited in the real life, we are going to do our best to have them deployed and commercialize it if it's possible.
Yeah, and I think the project has taught a lot about the different systems, so they can be optimized a little bit more now. So this will be the last question, and Ma, I'm going to come to you because I haven't asked you a question yet. So Ken Rodekop has asked the question, which is, why don't we combine the PP and PN groups and look at the effect of cluster on the outcome? I mean, do you think that would be a good sort of biostatistical approach, Ma?
Well, from now, the analysis that I have presented, we have compared the alter groups, and we have not focused on the treatment or the intervention. So in order to validate the goodness of the algorithm, we needed to find if the clusterization of the different participants was done okay. So I think that, yes, of course, when now we are working on the other analysis on, well, the analysis that the other parts has done to compare the PN or PP, yes, could be an option to work together, to separate and do the different statistical analysis.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of data across these 4 studies, so it's early days. So I have to call the session to a close. Thanks very much to the 4 presenters for 4 excellent and informative presentations. We'll close it now, and I'll hand over to Josep for the closing ceremony. Josep.
Thank you, Philip.